Okay, Niall Harbison is a person whose work I have gotten to know over the past 6 months or 9 months. It's an incredibly inspiring story. It's a complex story, but the work that he is doing is devoted to the noble and I think inspiring work of rescuing as many street dogs as he can in the place that he now lives, which is Thailand. He was born in Ireland. He has had a series of difficulties in his life that he has very openly talked about, and not only talked about the way in which that led him to do this sort of work of rescuing street dogs, but also the ways in which that work that he found has helped him overcome a lot of those problems. It's a story, a type of story I hear a lot about, being somebody who works myself in the world of dog rescue, and I have been very excited to talk to him for a long time because the work that he is doing is genuinely amazing, as is his story, and I want to welcome Niall to our show. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk to us.
Thanks for having me, and it sounds good that you're doing some dog work yourself.
Yeah. We have 26 dogs, rescue dogs in our home, and a shelter as well that relies on homeless employees. But I want to talk about your story, and obviously, part of my interest is based on the work that I've been doing, the impact it had on me, the things that led us to do this work. But your story, I think, is so interesting. So let's just begin by talking about the project that you've created that began as kind of a small project, now seems to be growing quite rapidly. It has a lot of different impact in a lot of different areas when it comes to dogs. Before we get into how you got there and what it's done for you, let's just talk about the project itself and what it is that it's designed to do.
Yeah, so I came to Thailand and I actually started feeding street dogs. I mean, if anybody's been in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia, there's 8 million street dogs in Thailand, which is, unfathomable for anybody in the West or America maybe. And they're on every street corner, they're outside every shop, they really suffer. So I started feeding them naively, thinking that would be the solution, but it's evolved from there into a huge program where we actually sterilize dogs. Sterilizing is like neutering or spaying. So we're trying to control the population, and we also rehome dogs, but our main focus is really on trying to have generational change in how street dogs are treated around the world.
Change, I mean, obviously people can relate to and immediately understand the act of finding a dog on the street who has been abandoned or homeless or stray. They might be suffering from disease or malnutrition, and you pick them up and you care for them and you nurse them back to health and you try and find a home for them. But what other kinds of more systemic changes are you talking about that you're hoping to be able to implement to make this, because there's, as you say, there's so many dogs in the world that even if you devote yourself every day to what I just described, you're helping a tiny fraction and you're not really redressing the problem. So what kinds of changes does your project look to implement?
Well, it's without sort of, talking badly about anybody else, every organization in the world has failed at doing this so far. Like what we're doing at the moment with dog rescue is really like a sticky plaster on a heart attack. It's nobody's directly assessing or addressing the core problem, which is overpopulation. And so our main focus is really 3 areas. One is sterilizing, which is kind of quite boring and people don't get that excited about it. It's controlling dog populations and stuff like that. People prefer the cute makeover or the really nice rescue story, which we do as well. And the second part then is education. So we need to change hearts and minds, and really there's a lot of dog lovers in this part of the world, but they maybe don't have the tools or the knowledge. And then the third part, which I haven't got to yet, which is very important, is kind of, I just call it legislation at the moment, but we need to get governments involved, and we need to really have state participation to fix this problem, because there's 500 million street dogs in the world, and my ambition is to halve that in my lifetime. So got to try and save 250 million dogs, which is challenging, but I think we're on the right path, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've seen your project entail, and every dog rescue project that I think has real value that goes beyond just the obvious steps of trying to just randomly save a few dogs here and there, which is a great thing to do, I mean, certainly better than nothing, is the idea of public education and sterilization. because dogs breed very rapidly and very easily and very quickly at a very young age. And it's sort of like running behind this wheel that just keeps going faster and faster the more you run behind it. If you don't sterilize street dogs, they're just going to keep producing by the thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions. So what is it that you're doing in that regard?
Yeah, so a really good analogy is if you think of a bathtub overflowing, you can, like, the way they think of it is rescue dogs is just sort of mopping up the floor. But what we're trying to do is turn off the tap so as the bath stops overflowing. And you're right about rescues. Like a lot of my friends have rescues and people that I respect and love, but they're really drowning in a problem that can never be fixed. And it's so sad that, especially with street dogs, it's not a great life to just take them off the street and put them into a rescue where can often feel like a prison for them. So we really want to systematically change the whole outlay for street dogs, and we do other things, like we feed 1,000 street dogs every day. We make them really nutritious food with rice and vegetables, so there's 1,000 dogs every day get a great meal. We also provide them with vet care, but really the most important is we're up to 6,000 operations now every month, 6,000 sterilizations, which is a tiny drop in the ocean, but I only started on my own 2 years ago. So I feel like we're making some progress, but we kind of think of it as a sort of a growth startup type way. That's my background. I used to work in marketing. So I'm trying to think of a way to sort of scale it really, really fast, because the dogs are out there suffering really horrible, car crashes, poisonings, really bad diseases on a daily basis. And I see that, and I just want to fix it as quickly as I can.
So one of the reasons I enjoy so much talking to people who do this, and it's not only because people feel good about hearing people devoted to dogs in need, although that I think is a very positive aspect, is that it's very rare that people get devoted to this because they say were born in a family whose parents were devoted to it and they just kind of picked it up. It's something that, I think has to be created by something in your life that leads you to this work. Sometimes it can just be coincidence, but oftentimes I think it's sort of deeper than that. But can you talk about how it is that you ended up as someone born in Ireland, as sort of a resident of and citizen of Ireland who ended up in Thailand, but not just ended up in Thailand, but specifically devoting your life to dogs and to the effort to protect and save them?
Yeah, I think you're right. Some of the stuff that we see on a daily basis in animal rescue is just horrific. I mean, it's the worst of the worst. I don't share it online because I don't think people want to see that. But you need a special sort of, willpower to do it. And yet my background was, I was an alcoholic and I nearly drank myself to death. I ended up in ICU. I was addicted to red wine, Valium, everything. And I was an alcoholic for 25 years, and I moved to Thailand, ironically, to try and get healthy because there's quite a drinking culture in Ireland. The weather's dark, it's cold. So I said, go somewhere where the weather is nice and try and get sober. But the opposite happened. I had no family or friends around here, so I went off the rails big time. So ended up in hospital. I've suffered for depression and had some childhood trauma for my whole life. And then when I was in hospital, hooked up to all the machines. I mean, I was nearly dead. They were pumping, I don't know what into me to keep me alive. But I just said, wow, I need to make a change. This, if I do this again, I'm going to die. So I walked out of the hospital, never drank again, never took anything again. And that was 4 years ago. And once you've come that close to death and seen the sort of, the end, everything goes out of life. Like, I don't care about money. I don't care about, material goods or anything. I just want to make a difference for the dogs in their lives. And it is an incredibly challenging world. Like, really, you see the worst of humanity. You see cruelty, you see neglect, you see everything. So I think my background of, I saw my mum getting beaten up when I was smaller. So seeing that and seeing, nearly dying in hospital, I think makes me able to deal with the dogs, because I can go out there and say, right, I've seen some pretty bad stuff, but let's get you guys fixed and let's make a difference in the world.
There is, as I'm sure you know, this kind of rapidly increasing rate of alcoholism and addiction in the modern Western world. We talk a lot about, on this show and elsewhere, some of the attributes of how life in the West kind of isolates people, atomizes people, keeps us behind computer screens. We're very much removed from the way that we've evolved as human beings over many centuries, and as a result, oftentimes we end up with kind of a lack of connection. And I think there's a lot of understanding and knowledge now about addiction and alcoholism of the kind that you suffered, this very severe kind that almost killed you, that a lot of it just comes from this, it's not so much, oh, these substances are addictive and if you take them then you're hooked. It really comes from this kind of spiritual deprivation or spiritual illness, kind of a lack of purpose, a lack of connection. And I know so many people who say that their work with dogs is what finally kind of cured them of that underlying malady. It doesn't cure you of everything. It doesn't make your traumas disappear, but it's something that gives a kind of connectiveness that often can be evasive or difficult when dealing with humans or the rest of the world. How has that been for you? What have dogs, because so often I know when people hear about someone who rescues dogs, they think, oh, that person's doing so much for those dogs, it's so nice and benevolent, but in fact, the dogs are doing so much for you as well. Can you talk a little bit about what your own experience has been in that regard?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that the dogs have saved me as much as I've saved them. Like, I don't think, like, I've obviously got an addictive personality, so I don't think it's wrong to say that I'm addicted to the feeling of joy that I get in saving a dog. So, as an alcoholic, I was probably not very reliable, would not show up on time and stuff like that, or show up at all. So being able to show up every day and bring the dogs a simple meal and see their tails wagging and see them like they depend on you. So it's a lovely feeling to have that. And you do have that connection with the dogs. Like I feed over 100 every day. Personally, we feed 1,000 around the island with volunteers. And those 100 dogs are, looking into your eyes and excited to see you. And there is a real connection. And you're completely right, because when I then finish the dogs about 10 or 11, I've walk into a coffee place to have a coffee and I look around, everybody's staring at their phone. The latest news is on. It's depressing. It's, people ironically come to Thailand to escape the rat race and to escape the 9 to 5 and all the pressures of life. But then the first thing they're doing here is I look at them, they're staring at their phones instead of looking at the beautiful view. And I'm as guilty as anybody of looking at my phone. It's a very addictive monster that we have in our pocket at all times. But the connection with the dogs is beautiful, and it would be nice to go back to that way of life full time for a lot of people. But it's dogs are fantastic.
I think there's sort of sometimes. First of all, people love dog rescue stories as content online. There are a few things that viralize as much, that make people as happy. From the beginning, the internet was sort of driven by consumption of porn and animal stories, of all kinds. And for all the talk about how, dogs, animals are meant to be eaten and all of this, people clearly have a sort of inbuilt empathy for animals that moves them emotionally when they see them online, not just dogs, but certainly especially dogs as well. As you say, it's not always a happy ending. It's not always easy because you're dealing with a lot of sad cases, a lot of difficult cases that don't have a happy ending. But what about people who are sort of cynical and say, yeah, it seems kind of nice that you're helping these dogs, but there's at least as much, if not more, human suffering. And as humans, our obligation ought to be to prioritize the alleviation of human suffering and not the suffering of animals. How do you think about that?
Well, I think humans are doing each other enough damage that they can figure it out themselves, is my kind of logic on the thing. No, it's the thing with the dogs is I share content that's really positive and uplifting. Like, I kind of edit it, for one of a better reasons, to put it into the world. When I started this, I was like, okay, I know how to make content. I can go down the traditional route, which, you know, every rescue and dog charity around the world does. They need to show the suffering. But if you're on the subway in New York or you're driving in, you know, London, you don't want to. I don't want to scroll and see some dog with half its head missing and blood and guts and like. You want to see something positive. So I try and put positive stories out there where you show the change that's been made, you show a recovery of an animal, and it puts like we offer a solution as well. Like it's not just saying like send us money immediately, we're going to close down, we're, you know, that's unfortunately the world that a lot of dog rescues live in, whereas I'm trying to create something where there's a real tangible solution. And you know, the work that we do by sterilizing all those dogs, like we'll sterilize 50,000 dogs this year, which will stop 500,000 dogs coming into the world. That's a little bit abstract when you hear those numbers, but like 500,000 dogs won't be born into suffering because of what we do this year. So I think it's really important to focus on the positives. And in terms of should we be coming up with something like, I mean, I look at the oceans around here beside me or the sea, and it's, you know, troll full of plastic and horrible. But that's a huge problem on its own, and I'm not the one to fix that. I'm going to focus on the dogs, which is hard enough as it is to tackle, and hopefully somebody else will focus on the other problems.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of trying to prioritize, you know, suffering or needs, you know, if you did focus on humans and giving people education, you would say, oh, why are you focusing on humans in the United States? There's children who are in Sudan or in Somalia who are suffering even worse. And I think, you know, anybody who's trying to lessen suffering in the world is inherently doing a noble thing. And the attempt to say, oh no, objectively, there's something you should be doing differently, is a byproduct of cynicism. One of the reasons I found your work online is because it really is compelling. You know, you tell a story in a way that I think only someone truly devoted to this work can do, and you tell it in a way that individualizes the story and personality of each dog and their recovery. And that's something that's not easy to do. So for those people who are interested in your work, who want to support it, but especially who want to follow it and understand it, where can people find you?
I'd say the two best places are on X, or whatever we're calling it these days, just my name, and Instagram. My name as well is, or the charity is happydoggo.com. But yeah, I'm not hard to find, and it's just positive, uplifting dog content without any pressure on, you know, I think you can just follow along and feel inspired in a dark world that we sometimes live in.
Yeah, I mean, we call this doom scrolling, where you just kind of constantly use your phone and you find all this bad news, and to see something that's kind of uplifting, but not in a artificial or syrupy way, but in a very genuine and kind of devoted way, I think is cleansing for the human soul. It certainly has that effect on me when I look at your content, so I want to say thank you for that. I really appreciate it, and I hope people will follow your work and then just see the impact that it has on them, and I hope you keep up the great work.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right, have a good evening. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.